In my previous video, I talked about the karmic acts, and that was one of the least popular videos I've ever made in terms of people just don't really want to click on the video and watch it. And I understand why, it's just because it's not a flashy topic like psychedelics might be. But for people who are willing to listen and actually deeply understand the karmic acts, there's so much huge life value in just comprehending it. And in a similar fashion now, we're going to move on to a slightly different topic, which is the karmic knife. So the ancient Sanskrit language of India has a lot of useful words in it that we can just use in our English dictionary. Karma, of course, is the most famous example. You know, there's no real English equivalent to that word. So we take the word karma and just use it in everyday life. But another word that's really good is Viveka, which is closely related to the word discernment. You could say it's the same word, but I think there's some slight nuances which just give it a different vibration. So Viveka is not judgment. That's the main thing to understand about this topic. And we're getting in the territory of semantics here, but for the purposes of this video, judgment is sort of the ego putting someone else down. You're judging them for doing whatever you don't like. But discernment or Viveka is different. For instance, if you see two dogs that look similar, but you notice slight differences in the two, that's discernment. You're not judging either dog, you're just noticing the differences. Or if you're thinking of buying a car, which one are you going to choose? You use your discernment, your Viveka, to look at all the different pros and cons, see if you can find something that might be wrong with the car, but there's never this ego judgment. That's a very important thing to understand, and that's not what the video is about, but that's a core theme of the topic. So that was just the introduction. Now let us take a step back and comprehend what I'm going to say, because this is the important nugget that we're going to be using as the thesis or hypothesis. So I'm not going to be telling you something, I'm going to be posing a question. And I just want you to think of the question and comprehend its implications deeply. So the question is, can only that which is good be corrupted? So religion is like a very obvious example. A lot of people think religion is evil. I think religion is very much corrupted many of the time. But the core of religion is good and true, and there's real value there, but then that true value gets corrupted. But something that is just wrong in general, let's say jealousy. Can jealousy be corrupted? Can hatred be corrupted? Can a genocide be corrupted? I don't think those things can be corrupted. Only things which are good can be corrupted. So religion is the most obvious example for that. But this is what the purpose of the video is basically, is just thinking of all sorts of topics, all sorts of themes in life, and thinking for yourself, can it be corrupted and how is it corrupted? And you want to use your discernment, your Viveka, your consciousness, that's like a knife, a razor sharp knife, to notice the moment when something gets corrupted and what aspect of it is the corruption. So obviously I'm talking about this, and you will be thinking about this if you choose to take up this little game, this useful game. But the purpose is more to use your consciousness and to sharpen your Viveka. It's not to think or have thoughts or build philosophies. So let's just take a few common examples. Sexuality can be a really good one. Some people just have an aversion to sexuality if they're like really religious, but most people I think would agree that sexuality at its core is really a good thing. So you can use your discernment. What is the good aspects of sexuality? But then, on the other hand, of course, sexuality can get corrupted in many, many different ways. You know, jealousy is just the most obvious example. If something like that creeps in, the pure goodness of sexuality gets corrupted into a negativity. Let's take a very silly example as well, but one that's quite important actually. Farming. I think at its core, farming is a good thing, but farming can get corrupted if the farmer starts to prioritize making money rather than growing a good product, and they might use harmful pesticides or just not care about the pesticides because they just want money. So in that case, the farming would get corrupted, and the moment of corruption is when the farmer's priorities change from feeding people to making money. So use your Viveka to notice that moment of where it shifts from absolute goodness to a bit of corruption. Because that skill is so useful in your life. As you get more and more conscious through meditation, you're going to notice that the real growth comes in noticing things moment by moment. And if you sharpen your Viveka, you can notice within yourself the moment that corruption sneaks in. And that's really, really, really valuable in life. That's how you live from a place of deep happiness and fulfillment. But anyway, let's just take the next example now, which is working in general. Working is fantastic. It's a way for us to serve other people. But again, why does it get corrupted so easily? It's that selfish energy. If you use your discernment, you should notice that the point at which working, having a job becomes corrupted, or owning a business, is when people prioritize making money over actually serving other people. So if you're a lawyer, that could in theory be fantastic. If you're in your mind, your genuine intention is to help with the legal side of people's lives. But if your intention shifts to making money, that gets corrupted like instantly. Money in general also, money I think at its core is a good thing. It allows civilizations to be built, and it allows us to trade energy in essence. But when we start worshipping money over something else, when money stops being a tool but becomes the object of wanting, object of desire, that gets corrupted. Also power. Power is at its core a really, really good thing, I believe, because it gives you basically free will. None of us are all powerful, but all of us are somewhat powerful. And if you use that power for good, it's fantastic, but there can be this really slight moment that you can notice where the power gets corrupted into satisfying some sort of a selfish desire that harms other people. So those are just a few examples, but the point here is really for you, whoever wants to get the benefit of sharpening their discernment, their Viveka, is to practice this moment by moment on many different themes. You can notice it in other people, that will be really valuable. You can notice it in the big businessmen, famous people, but ultimately you want to be using it within yourself to notice the moment that corruption happens. That's the basic point. This is just an exercise. You can do it in a proper meditation. You can use it while walking down the road, while on the bus. And if you spend a month just sort of trying to notice this moment by moment, because that's the point. It needs to be done over the whole day, noticing how energies come and go, what are the themes associated with it. It can get really subtle and sharp. That's why there's the metaphor of the knife. In the previous video I talked about an axe. That's usually a hefty thing with a lot of weight because that symbolizes decisive action. But a knife is a thin thing. It's really sharp. So it requires a lot of focus from you. And just developing this focus is really good in a lot of spiritual ways. So if you're interested in deep spirituality and in enlightenment, it's basically mandatory. As far as I'm aware, I can only see it being really absolutely a requirement if you want to raise your levels of consciousness to have a really sharp Viveka, a sharp mind. But this is also a really interesting topic because it sort of turns back on itself. If you keep using this Viveka, you eventually enter states of non-duality where there isn't really a separation of good and bad. But still, you need to go through this process of discerning the moment of corruption. What is the good aspects? What is the negative aspects that take you further away from God? And the knife at some point metaphorically turns back on itself, because this is, as I mentioned at the start, a really tricky, subtle topic. The difference between discernment and judgment, or Viveka, and looking down on people or grimacing at energies. There isn't really a nice way that I can think of to describe the difference between discernment and judgment in the negative sense. It's up to you to practice this so you can notice the moment, the difference between discerning honestly, genuinely, that's like a heart-centered energy, a consciousness-centered energy, where you notice the difference. And then there's the judgment, which is an ego sort of energy that usually wants to wrap around and make knots. And it usually makes you unhappy. It sort of feels like the heart gets covered up. But that can be a really subtle process that you need to work through. But that's the point. The point is to sharpen the Viveka. And in doing this, basically, it will set you free from the illusion of the mind, the illusion of the ego mind, because that's sort of what the ego is. It's constantly spinning stories, but most of these stories are slightly corrupting. They're an illusion. But by developing the Viveka, you can see the illusion creeping in moment by moment. And as your Viveka gets really sharp and strong, eventually the ego mind cannot fool you, and then it doesn't even come up very much, or it starts being reduced. It doesn't come up in the same patterns that it used to. And that really is freedom. If you can have a mind that doesn't delude you and just works as a tool for you, that's the ultimate goal of this exercise. And that will bring you a lot closer to the liberation of your energy system.